What's up everybody, Giant Killer here from 2ppressstart.com, and today we're going to start up a new series that I'm going to call the Deck Doctor. In this series I'm going to take a look at Hearthstone decks that people have asked for help with in one way or another, either on a forum, in a post on our site, or by sending an email, or whatever, and see if I can break the deck down piece by piece and hopefully improve on it and make it into a viable competitive deck for Hearthstone ranked play. We're going to talk about some of my card choices, I'll walk you through my deck building process a bit, and then we're going to take each deck out for a spin in a ranked game or two. Now, I don't claim to be any sort of Hearthstone Pro or anything like that, but I have been playing card games for about 20 years now, since right before Magic the Gathering Revised Edition came out, and so as you might imagine, I've built a deck or two in my day. Before the patch just hit on Hearthstone, I was ranked at 3-star Masters in ranked constructed play, and I always try to keep an eye on the current metagame in Hearthstone tournaments and streams and things like that. Now, I've never really believed in spending a ton of money on a card game, so I also know a thing or two about creating good decks on a budget, and that'll be a focus in a lot of our episodes here. So, without further ado, let's get to the Deck Doctor's first patient. For my first victim/patient, I found this post from Truce on Battle.net Hearthstone Warlock forums. Truce writes, "Hi guys, I've been playing a few matches with this deck I've built. I crafted some cards, but I can't afford any of the good ones just yet. Can anyone help me with this Aggro Warlock deck?" Well, yes, Truce, yes we can. Alright, so here's Truce's deck. He's obviously looking to put together an aggro deck, as he's mentioned in the post, so we want something that's going to be able to hit the board running, go for the face, and try and get those early wins that Aggro Warlock decks are famous for. So the goal here is going to be to kind of trim the fat, get rid of the cards that don't fit into that aggro theme so well, and try and replace them with cards that fit the theme a little bit better, and get this deck running on all cylinders. We're going to assume that he doesn't want to add any rares or higher. He mentioned in his post that he can't afford the good cards yet, so we're going to assume he doesn't want to add any rares, any epics, any legendaries. We will, however, assume that he can scrape together a few dusts so he can craft up a few commons if they're absolutely essential to this sort of deck. Commons are pretty cheap to craft, coming in at 40 dust each, and that's pretty easy to put together, so we'll assume he can scrape that together. Otherwise, we're going to try and work with what he's got, what's free, what's cheap. We're not going to put in any rares, any epics, any legendaries that aren't already in there. And from a quick glance through it, the only rare in there right now is an Argent Commander, which is an amazing rare. It has a great place in the deck, and that's not going anywhere. So, what we're going to do is take a look at the deck as a whole. I would note, first of all, this is a really good start. Truce has an original deck list here that certainly is on its way to being a great and really effective Aggro Warlock deck. We're going to go through first and take a look at the good. I think it's always a good idea to start out with what's good about a deck. We'll talk about the good choices he made, then we'll move on and talk about the choices that could stand to be improved on a little bit. Alright, taking a look first at what's good about Truce's Aggro Warlock deck. I would note the very first thing that jumps out at me about this deck is it's only 29 cards, so we know we've already got a little bit of room for improvement, and that's never a bad thing. But let's talk about some of the cards that Truce chose that we're definitely going to hang on to for Aggro Warlock and why. First of all is Soulfire. Soulfire is an amazing tempo card. It's an amazing finisher, and it's really, really good for dealing with a threat that you don't want to have to sacrifice one of your creatures to deal with. Soulfire is fantastic for all of those things. 0 mana makes it incredibly versatile. You can use it in a lot of situations where its drawback is completely negated. If it's the last card in your hand, you don't have to worry about discarding anything. If you're finishing your opponent off with it, it doesn't matter what you discard because he's dead. So this is definitely something you want to include 2 of in every Aggro Warlock deck. Power Overwhelming is another fantastic Aggro Warlock card. It's great for out-of-nowhere kills. Buffing up a minion with +4/+4 is fantastic. It does require you to have a creature on board at the start of your turn to make it really useful, or a charger in hand, but being able to slap an additional 4 damage onto something can very often net you a kill. The Argent Squire is a really great 1-drop. We're definitely hanging on to these. 1/1 with Divine Shield is a really great value for 1 mana, and they're likely to stick around long enough to be buffed up by one of your buffing creatures later on. The Elven Archer is another really good 1-drop. It's really versatile with that Battle Cry, lets you deal 1 damage. That can do some great things for you, like popping Divine Shields at a really low cost. You can finish off 1 health minions, you can kill enemy 1-drops, and you know, if you've got nothing else to do with it, you can always just push through that 1 damage to the face. I have definitely seen kills with an Elven Archer to score that last point of damage. Moving on to the Flame Imp. The Flame Imp is such an amazing aggro card. 3/2 for 1 mana is just incredible value, and the 2 damage backfire is not all that bad, really, when it comes right down to it. Definitely worth it to get the 3/2 body out on the board. If you can coin out 2 of these on your first turn, that's just an amazing play, and it really, really puts your opponent on his heels. Leper Gnome, another great 1-drop. This deck really is flush with good 1-drops here. The Death Rattle effect is amazing on this guy. Not only is he 2/1 for 1 mana, so he can often trade up, but he's almost guaranteed to do that 2 damage. And again, if the only way they can really prevent that is to leave him alive or silence him, and if they want to waste a silence on a 1-drop, well, you're winning right there. Voidwalker is another really good 1-drop. 1/3, it's not the most aggro of cards, but the reason it's in here and the reason it's great is it's a taunt, so it can keep your opponent from killing off some of your higher attack, lower toughness creatures, so that those high attack creatures can keep attacking your opponent directly. It'll definitely take one for the team, and it's also a really great target for Demon Fire later on. Novice Engineer is a great value card. You get a 1/2 body plus a card. If you can do anything useful with the 1/2 body, great. It's usually going to generate a couple of points of damage because your opponent doesn't usually want to spend a card to address a 1/2 minion, but sometimes they will. If you can buff it up, you get even more value out of it, and you always get a card, so you generally all you're down is 2 mana if you don't do anything useful with the Novice Engineer itself. Harvest Golem is an amazing 3-drop simply because of its durability. If your opponent is trying to clear the board with a Consecrate or with a Holy Nova, it's going to survive thanks to its 3 health. Even better if you got a Blood Imp there buffing it up to 4 health. Even if it does get wiped by a sweeper, you're going to get the damaged Golem back after it's gone, unless it's been silenced, but that doesn't happen as often as you think. And so you're likely to have something that sticks around to be buffed later on, and that's why it's a great thing to have in a deck where you're running buff creatures like the Shattered Sun Cleric, like the Dark Iron Dwarf, that sort of thing later on. Shattered Sun Cleric we were just talking about. It's one of the best 3-drops in the game, if not the best 3-drop in the game, thanks to that battle cry. Giving a friendly minion +1/+1 is absolutely huge. It means you're getting 4/4 worth of value for 3 mana, and that's amazing value right there. But you could even consider that +1/+1 to have charge attached to it, because you're usually going to be playing that and buffing up something that's already been on the board, so you can make use of that +1/+1 buff right away. So you can sort of get a little bonus there if you're playing it on a minion that's already on board. And finally, the Argent Commander is arguably one of the best minions in the game. It's an almost guaranteed 2-for-1 thanks to the combination of charge and Divine Shield. It comes onto the board. It immediately can deal with something. It can take out most minions that you're going to see in play these days, and then stick around and demand to be addressed by your opponent on the following turn because it has that Divine Shield. The great thing about charge is you get to decide how that Divine Shield is used up. So you have a lot more control over it when you're using it on a minion with charge, like the Argent Commander, and that is why he's one of the better minions in the game. Most competitive decks are going to run 2 of these guys. Alright, so that is the look at what's good about Truce's deck. These were some great choices. These are great cards to include in an Aggro Warlock deck. Next up, we're going to take a look at what we can possibly trim from the deck to make room for some improvements. Okay, first up on the list of what can be trimmed is the Voodoo Doctor. Voodoo Doctor is a decent 2/1 1-drop, however its battle cry is not fantastic in an aggro deck. The general mission of your 1-drops is you want to be playing them as soon as possible, turn 1, 2, or 3, get them on the board, get them doing damage. You don't want to be holding on to them, waiting for the perfect time to use their battle cry. If you play a Voodoo Doctor early, there's probably not going to be a good use for his battle cry. It's probably going to be wasted. And in a lot of cases, even healing yourself with it early on is not a really good use of that battle cry. If you hang on to this guy for later, then he's a very underwhelming 2/1 body, and not a really great use of a card, even with the heal. So the Voodoo Doctor just doesn't synergize real well with the aggro theme of the deck, and we will cut him out. Next up is the Murloc Tidehunters. These guys are great in an aggro Murloc deck, but this isn't an aggro Murloc deck, so it really falls behind. It has the 3/2 for 2, which is decent for 2-drops. Most of the 2-drops in the game are either 3/2 or 2/3 for 2 mana, but this one is especially bad because it splits that up among two different bodies, both of which end up having 1 toughness. That makes it incredibly vulnerable to the mage hero ability, the druid hero ability, the rogue hero ability, and the low damage sweepers. So unless you're running this guy in a Murloc aggro deck, it probably doesn't have a place. It's outshone by most of the other 3/2 2-drops. We're going to get rid of both of these Murloc Tidehunters here. Next up is the Gnomish Inventor. This is a great card. It can be a great value generator. It has the potential to even go 3 for 1. If you drop this guy, you get your card, you smack something that's 3/2, it survives, and your opponent has to address it with another card. You've just scored yourself a 3 for 1 play. The problem is that doesn't happen all that often. It really requires a very specific set of circumstances for that to work. Also, it's just too slow for an Aggro Warlock deck. You're getting 2 power out of the card, and that's just not good enough for 4 mana. So we are cutting the Gnomish Inventor. Next up, Sen'jin Shieldmaster, and this is an amazing card. It's just a little bit of a slow card. It's really more of a defensive-oriented card, and we want offensive-oriented cards in this deck. It's great value. 3/5 taunt for 4 mana is fantastic. It can generally generate some pretty good trades, but that's not what we're looking to do with an Aggro Warlock deck. We want to be beating on our opponent, not generating board control and good trades. So we're going to cut both of these. Next up is the Stormwind Knight. It can be a decent card, not great generally ever. You can drop it down and take out something with 2 toughness, and if it survives, you can create a 2 for 1 that way. The problem is, again, 2 attack power for 4 mana is just not good enough in an aggro deck, so we are cutting him. Next up is the Darkscale Healer, and I do not like the Darkscale Healer really ever. I don't find it to be a great card in just about any deck, and it's especially bad in an Aggro Warlock deck. You'll notice that the stats 4/5 are the same as a Chillwind Yeti, but it costs 5 mana instead of 4, and that's because of the Battle Cry. The Battle Cry is just not that useful. Healing yourself for 2 is not worth paying an extra mana for this card. The only way it's really worth it is if you have some creatures on board already, and you attack in with them and they survive, but they're damaged, and you can heal them all back up with the Darkscale Healer. The problem is those circumstances don't happen nearly enough to justify this card's inclusion in just about any deck, let alone the Aggro Warlock deck. This is a pretty easy cut. Finally, we have the Lord of the Arena. This guy is 6/5 with Taunt for 6 mana. That's not terrible. The problem is, number one, it's again, with Taunt, more of a defensive-oriented card. It costs 6 mana. That's a little slow for this type of deck, and its stats are backwards. Generally, Taunters want to have higher health, lower attack, so that they can survive a couple of attacks and generate card advantage that way. We're not looking to generate card advantage. By the time we get to turn 6, we want to be finishing off the opponent. That means by the time we get to turn 6+, we want something that can affect the board immediately for our 6 mana. Argent Commander can do that, Lord of the Arena cannot, so he is getting cut. Alright, so that's it for what can be trimmed from the deck. That leaves us with 10 slots to work with, and that means there's plenty of room for improvement. When we're looking at additions to this deck, we're going to be trying to focus on the theme of killing the opponent before he kills us, or, more importantly, killing the opponent before he gains control of the board and plays threats that are so big that we can't address them and overcome them. To that end, we're going to need creatures that are very aggressive. That means high attack power. We also need creatures that can affect the board as soon as they come into play. We also need a little bit of removal to get rid of emergency level threats, and also to get rid of any taunters that might be standing in the way of our beaters, so our beaters can keep doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's beating on the enemy's face. Alright, with that in mind, the first card we're going to add is 2 Demon Fires. Demon Fire is great cheap removal, or a great cheap buff for our demons. It's a really versatile card. Voidwalkers and Blood Imps are both great targets for Demon Fire, and so are enemy Knife Jugglers that you need to kill and kill now. Next up, Blood Imps. Just about every Warlock deck can benefit from Blood Imps because they are an amazing value. We're going to pop in 2 Blood Imps here. Blood Imps buff up the rest of your board. They make every other creature you play difficult for the enemy to achieve favorable trades with because of that +1 health. It's just an incredible boost to your side of the table, and they have the added bonus of staying in stealth so that they're incredibly difficult to get rid of. Next up, we're going to run 2 Shadow Bolts. These are, again, cheap removal, and this is exactly what we were talking about with cheap removal intended to remove taunt creatures. If you play against a lot of defenders of Argus, they have a tendency to make 3-drops into 4 toughness taunters, and that is the perfect target for a Shadow Bolt. Shadow Bolt clears the way so your minions can keep going for the face, and that's what you want them to be doing. Next up, we're going to add 2 Dark Iron Dwarves. These are 4 casting cost minions, and some of the better ones in the game. These guys have incredible value, generating 6 total attack power and 4 toughness for 4 mana. And again, like the Shattered Sun Cleric's buff, the +2 attack from their battle cry is even better because you can usually buff something that's already on the board, and that means you can use it right now. And that means you can do some unexpected trades, you can do some unexpected damage to the face, you can kill things that your opponent didn't think you were going to be able to kill, and sometimes that includes him. Okay, this is a fantastic addition to this deck, especially because it has some very durable low drops. The Argent Squire is very durable, the Voidwalker is fairly durable, the Harvest Golem is incredibly durable, and all of these would make great targets for your Dark Iron Dwarf later on if they survive to be buffed. Next up, we are going to add 1 Venture Company Mercenary. These guys are fantastic value for 5 mana. 7/6 for 5 mana is incredibly aggressive. The drawback of making your minions cost 3 more is not too bad in a deck like this where you're expecting to have most of your hand played out by the time you get this guy. Plus, if you can play him on turn 5, there aren't really a lot of great answers outside of Priest decks with their Shadow Word Death, and ultimately, he's going to force a lot of 2-for-1s, or he's going to do a lot of damage straight to your opponent's face if they don't have something to block him with, like a taunter, or if they don't have some way to deal with him. So a lot of times you're going to see the opponent spending a couple of cards trying to get rid of this Venture Co Mercenary because he doesn't want to eat 7 damage to the face. Last but not least, we are going to add 1 Spellbreaker. This is going to be the last card we add to the deck. This is a one-of because it's not always going to be amazing, but when it works, it's going to work great. First of all, it's 4 attack power for 4 mana, so that's more likely what we want to do with 4 mana in this kind of deck. The real reason it's in here is for that silence. There are going to be times when your opponent drops a taunting creature and thinks he's safe, and you can silence that creature with a Spellbreaker, get rid of the taunt, and swing through for the kill. That has happened a bunch. It's definitely worth including one of these guys in there. There are going to be times when you are really hoping that you're going to draw him and you're not going to draw him. There are going to be times when you're holding onto him all game and you never see a good target for that silence. But for those few times when you can silence a taunter and swing in for the kill, that just makes it absolutely worth it to run one of these guys in your deck. At the worst, it's a 4/3 body for 4 mana, which isn't terrible. At least you're getting the 4 attack power out of it. Alright, and that is the deck. Okay, so we're going to go through the deck one more time to show you what's in here. First of all, we have 2 Soulfires, we have 1 Power Overwhelming, 2 Argent Squires, 2 Blood Imps, 2 Elven Archers, 2 Flame Imps, 2 Leper Gnomes, 2 Voidwalkers, 2 Demon Fire, 2 Novice Engineer, 2 Shadow Bolts, 2 Harvest Golems, 2 Shattered Sun Clerics, 2 Dark Iron Dwarves, 1 Spellbreaker, 1 Venture Company Mercenary, and 1 Argent Commander. This is a much more aggro-themed deck than it originally was. All of these creatures, all these minions, all these spells are going to work together with the cohesive plan in mind of tearing down your opponent faster than he can generate board control, faster than he can get that advantage and keep it on the board. You do have a couple of out-of-nowhere kill options with the Argent Commander and the 2 Soulfires, and ultimately this should create some very solid early game advantage with your plethora of fantastic 1-drops, your very durable low-drop creatures, and then your fantastic value buffing creatures later on to take advantage of the fact that you're going to have minions on the board. This deck is fantastic at repopulating a board after sweepers. Make use of life tap whenever possible, so you can always have cards in hand and you can always be playing more of your low drop creatures so you can refill the board very quickly if it gets wiped. The Blood Imp is going to make everything else less susceptible to the board wipes anyway, but ultimately, you can always come back from a board wipe. I've had decks similar to this come back from being wiped 3 times and still manage to win because I can keep repopulating the board thanks to my low drop creatures and all the card draw that Life Tap provides. Ultimately, I think this is going to be a very successful deck, and Truce, I wish you the best of luck with it. Hope this helped. Right, just a quick addendum here. We actually recorded this video right before Blizzard released the latest patch for Hearthstone, so I just wanted to take a quick second to go through some of the changes and how they affect this deck. And ultimately, they don't really affect it a whole lot. It's still a really viable deck. It just has a few drawbacks that were introduced with the changes in the patch. So we're going to go through those. The first one was a small nerf to the Flame Imp. Right now, the Battle Cry deals 3 damage to your hero. Before, it was deal 2 damage to your hero. So you're taking 1 more damage when you drop a Flame Imp. Still absolutely worth running in the deck. Flame Imps are still amazing speed, amazing stats for 1 mana, and taking 1 extra damage from putting them out on the board is not a huge drawback. We still run 2 of those. They're still fantastic. Still wouldn't take them out. Probably, even if it dealt 4 damage to you, they'd still be worth running. Next up is the nerf to the Shattered Sun Cleric. Blizzard changed these from 3 3s to 3 2s. That makes them a little bit more vulnerable to the low damage sweepers like the Blizzards, the Consecrates, and the Holy Novas. So now they'll get wiped out by any of those. The good thing is you've still got your Blood Imps that can still buff these things up to 3/3, which would put them out of those low damage sweeper range. Still worth running because that +1/+1 buff when they come into play is still amazing. So definitely still worth running 2 of these. Argent Commanders also got a nerf. They got brought down from a 4/3 to a 4/2, but they've still got charge, they've still got Divine Shield, and it's the 4 damage that we're really concerned about. It still has the Divine Shield, so you can still almost always generate a 2-for-1. It just, kind of like the Shattered Sun Cleric, served to make them a little bit more vulnerable to the low damage sweepers. A little bit easier for the enemy to trade them out with lower cost minions once they've expended that Divine Shield. Still absolutely worth running in a deck. Still arguably worth running 2 in every deck, but in this case we will only stick with the 1. Alright, so this has been just a little bit of an update as to the recent patch, and we decided we're also going to go ahead and record a new game to show you how this deck works after the patch. So I'm not too far in the ranks yet, still in the process of ranking up, so we're going to show you a game on my way up, hopefully to Innkeeper and beyond. Thanks everybody for watching. Alright, this is Giant Killer bringing you some Aggro Warlock action. On the Warlock deck we've rebuilt for Truce. Going up against Barefoot Man the Rogue, and we've got a pretty decent opening hand here. I'm actually going to keep this whole hand. The first turn's going to be the standby Flame Imp play. I'm going to drop that. You can see the first impact of the new patch. It's now dealing 3 damage to us instead of 2. Not generally a big deal. Still absolutely worth running these guys. It's still a fantastic first turn play at 3/2 for 1 mana. Okay, he's going to sap that on back to our hand using the coin. It's a decent play because it causes it to damage us again when it comes back onto the board. So we're going to put it back into play, follow it up with an Ardent Squire, pass a turn on back. Okay, now he's going to backstab it. Now it has done a significant amount of damage to us, but he has spent 2 cards, 3 if you count the coin, addressing that 1 imp. So that makes it a very decent exchange for us. We're going to go ahead and drop the Shattered Sun Cleric, buff up
the Sunwell.
Squire, and send it in for 2 damage. Great thing about Ardent Squires is they come into play with that Divine Shield, which means there's a much higher chance they're going to stick around long enough to get buffed by something like a Shattered Sun Cleric. He's going to do the Phantom Knives, and this means he can finish off either of these 2 minions with his dagger. He elects to go for the Ardent Squire over the Shattered Sun Cleric, resulting in him taking a little bit less damage to the face.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
Buff up our existing Cleric and send it in. Chose this one over the Archer in this case because the Archer doesn't really add a lot to our board position at the moment, and we can use it anytime for 1 damage straight to the face. I'd rather kind of use it to make a trade a little bit better, pop off a wounded minion, or something like that, pop a Divine Shield, anything like that. Alright, this turn we're going to drop the Novice Engineer to get some card draw going. And we're going to do more card draw here. Drop the blood in to give everything a little bit of a nice buff. And we're going to start swinging
Push forward.
face. So right now, my other guys are protected by this Void Walker, which will likely get killed by the Master of Disguise this turn, unless he's got something else in his hand to kill this, in which case then he might trade it out for this 3/3. But that would put it in kill range for the Elven Archer. That's one great thing about the Elven Archer, is it turns things that your opponent thinks are decent trades into not so decent trades. Alright, so he's going to put this back in his hand so he can take advantage of the Battle Cry again. Next turn, he's still got 3 mana left to work with. He's apparently figuring out that he can't target something in stealth.
Ha! This guy's toast.
Alright, we got the SI-780 doing 2 damage to our elf. Okay. He has 13 life. We need to do 13 damage. We've got 4, 7, 8, 9. We're going to drop the Argent Commander for the last 4 that we need, and this should be fatal damage this turn, folks. Alright, so we got 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And that's the game. Alright, this has been the retuned aggro deck for Truce. Hope you liked what you saw. If you liked what you saw, please click like and subscribe to help us grow our channel. If you have any questions about how we rebuilt the deck, what we added, what we took out, please leave a comment below. Please ask any questions you have. We are happy to help. If you have any feedback about what you'd like to see, let us know that too. As you can see, I'm still working on getting my rank back up after the patch reset everything. I'm currently at 18 Sorcerer's Apprentice. Haven't had a whole lot of time to play yet, but this has been an example of how this Aggro Warlock deck can work. In this case, against kind of a minion combo rogue deck here. So please leave us a like and subscribe if you liked what you saw, and thanks so much for watching, everybody.